Thank you, Yaz, and thanks, Joseph, for having this TRP Talks. I'm excited today personally as a patient caregiver, I wear the caregiver hat, to have three guests here. I'm going to let the guests introduce themselves, and then we're going to have it kind of like just an open conversation. There was no preparation that they were asked to do, so pretty much everything goes, whatever you want to say. We're amongst a small group of, I think, how many do we have? Like 60 plus live. So this is going to be a very intimate conversation. Let's look at it that way. Okay, that this is the time we get to share our voices. But these are leading advocates, leading patients that I've looked up their personal stories. I kind of know Pat from before. We sat together. I think 3 years ago, Pat. I think at TRP. You're there, Pat.
Yeah, sorry, it took me a second to get off mute. Yes.
Sorry, that's another Pat. There's two Pats.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay.
It's okay, Pat. We can have.
No, I'm embarrassed.
No, I was embarrassed before when Joe talked to you, Pat. So I think we'll just get used to being confused about each other.
There you go.
Okay. Although I do think I know the other Pat. If anyways, but Pat Furlong. That's we sat together. I think as when you were able to come to Canada. I think 3 years ago. So. And I'm meeting Andrew and Serena for the first time today. So I look forward to learning and hearing from both of them as well. I believe, well, I'll let you both, or all three of you, introduce yourselves. We'll start with Pat. Pat, maybe you can share, your background, a little bit of your story in maybe 3 minutes or so, 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll pass it on to the others.
Sure. So I'm Pat Furlong, and I'm CEO of PPMD, or Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy. This is an organization that focuses on Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Duchenne is one of the most common diseases diagnosed in childhood. It's an X-linked disease, which means that primarily boys will have this disease or exhibit symptoms of the disease, and females can be carriers. One in about 4,600 males will be diagnosed with Duchenne, and the same number, 1 in 4,600 females will have a mutation in the dystrophin gene. It happens often in conception, and those folks may be unknown carriers until they have a family themselves. So Duchenne is progressive, so boys are born looking quite normal, but over the period of the next 10 to 15 years, what happens is as they grow, they're trying to turn over skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle, not turn over cardiac muscle, but turn over that skeletal muscle. And because it's missing this big dystrophin protein, muscle can't survive. So what we see is boys are born looking normal, they acquire skills but delayed, and then over a period of time, maybe about 7 years old, they plateau in their strength and lose strength. So they're usually off their feet by the time they're in their early teens. They can't move their arms by 15 or 16 years old, and they need ventilation help by the time they're in their late teens and early 20s. Mean age of death is 29. So our organization focuses on 4 pillars, basically research, care, education, and community, to promote community and to accelerate the development of therapies for this disease. So that's about it from me. We've been working on this about 26 years, and now in the advent of gene therapies.
So thanks, Pat. Hopefully, sorry, where are you again in the US? You're in the US.
I'm in Ohio.
Ohio, okay.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, I want to butt in. I can't let you get away with that. You have literally changed the face of advocacy for patients. You have moved research and changed the way that things are done with governments. So it's not just that you are one amazing person that has really made a big difference in many people's lives and have affected the way that one particular condition and many others as well are viewed and treated. So I just want to make sure that you understated yourself.
You're very kind, Joseph. I have a team of people. We have been in advocacy for 26 years. One of the first research investments, if you consider that, is a research investment, was to think about how we could leverage money out of the government, particularly NIH, the National Institutes of Health, Department of Defense, and the Center for Disease Control. So we were able, by making that investment in hiring consultants in Washington, to create and craft legislation and continue to do so. So our first legislation was the MD Care Act, And that was basically NIH money coming into Duchenne as well as Department of Defense. So since that legislation, we've had in Duchenne specifically about a $500 million investment, which brought industry online to really develop, based on fully characterizing the disease, clinical trials that have the potential to change the trajectory. And then we worked with regulatory to really think about patient-focused drug development and to craft, again, be part and parcel of working with legislators to craft the documents that lead to patient-focused drug development. So I come from a nursing background, and in nursing, we focus on the patient. What does the patient need? What value does the patient place on whatever intervention we're using, and really to gather that voice. So hopefully our organization and the people that I'm blessed to work with really have been instrumental in bringing that patient voice, not just for Duchenne, but for all diseases.
So I'm going to concur with Joseph here, Pat. You've done amazing work. And one thing I think, Joseph, I'm just going to share is that I think many of the patient advocates, we're not really in it, you know, like Pat, as you can tell, it's not about her, right? It's about the voices of the patient that we're trying to help support and speak or get out there. So sometimes it's not about, yeah, I think that's some of the challenges. And I don't even think it's a challenge, actually. It's just patients don't really gloat about themselves that much. It's about the people they're supporting. So I'm going to, Serena, I think you disappeared on us. I'm going to go to you next. Hi, Serena. There you are.
Hi.
So Serena, looking forward to learning more about you. You were born in New York, right?
Yes.
Okay. And where are you right now? Just curious. Where are you?
I'm in Scarborough. I'm in Toronto.
Hey, I'm in Scarborough. Are we neighbors?
Oh, might be neighbors.
Yeah, I'm right by the Toronto Zoo. Not in the zoo, but.
Oh my goodness, you're down the street from me then.
Okay, so we can have a nice little distant coffee down the road. So. But since we have all these friends online, why don't you share your background and how, a little bit of how you got to where you are today.
Oh boy. Well, I first of all, I am foremost, a sickle cell patient, advocate, and I sit on the board of the Sickle Cell Association of Ontario as vice president and director of programs. And how I got to this point, I really don't know, is one thing after another, but just living with the disease and going through the healthcare system and noticing gaps, noticing that there needed to be help for everyone that is dealing with sickle cell, families and individuals alike. We have, I decided to volunteer 10 years ago, and just being in the community, helping people, anytime they need help, I was always there. So I realized this is something that I really and truly want to do, which is help and volunteer. And so I was doing that for a while, ended up on the board, helped to change up a few things, helped to continue things, our education, our awareness. We have a care model for counseling, advocacy, research, and education. And so we pride ourselves in being able to support the community in any which way we can. And we love collaborating with other organizations to reach out, the population, reach out to the population. But how I got here is really, just dealing with the issues of racism and stigma and just not really talking about it growing up in our family. So when I realized that there's a big whole organization out there, like the one that I'm with, they've been around for about 40 years and almost 40 years and next year. And, we just supported as much as we could. And, we feel that we can reach more, we can reach out to more people, talking more about, the healthcare system, talk more about what is it that, individuals living with sickle cell really need, and then how we can provide those services. So growing up in, you know, I didn't grow up in New York. I came to Canada, and living here, you know, going to sick kids all the time. And then once I graduated at 18, it was Toronto General Hospital I was always going to. So that's basically how it is for a lot of us that living with sickle cell in Toronto. Basically face, which is, you know, trying to go to the ER, try to get relief, you know, from pain, that's the main thing. And then just trying to navigate through the whole entire system to make sure that you're getting the proper care. I guess that's why I'm here today.
So thanks, Serena. I always like to ask the question about someone's story.
Oh,
It always starts with the story, right? That's
does.
how we have our stories, Pat, Andrew, myself, Serena, and it's during those stories is where there's a lot of data and information, a lot of the gaps, you know, a lot of the pain points that we realize. And there comes a point where some of us become a little more involved. We switch over to that, not just being the patient, but we become an advocate. We start saying, okay, why are we not doing it this way? The big why. TRP talks about the why. I'm not sure if you're in, for those that are first year in the program, if you're at the why part, you'll hear that a lot, the why. And for us, we start usually communicating through story, you know, and then from that, our voices get louder, and then we start seeing the gaps, and then we leverage whatever we can. Pat, you used the word leverage, right? And that's a big deal. But how do we properly leverage, you know, the resources, the knowledge, you know, the skill sets that's out there. So Andrew, okay, so we're gonna have Andrew here, just like Pat, you know, has moved up. And Andrew, if you can share, you're also in here, not too far from me,
Yeah.
in the Big Apple, just east of Toronto, about an hour and a half, would we say?
Yeah, 2 hours on a good day, really.
Okay, so we're gonna hear Andrew's story a little bit here and how you got to where you're at there, Andrew.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm nice to meet you, Serena, and Pat. I know long-standing relationship and friends and kindred spirits. I usually in my speaker contracts make sure that I don't follow Pat in terms of beginning and introducing, because everything pales in comparison to my dear friend Pat Furlong. So happy to participate. I am the executive director of 2 different patient organizations. One is called the Isaac Foundation, and the other one is called Equal Access for Rare Disorders. And I never really know how to explain what I do, because there's 1,000 different things that sort of fall on our plate on a daily basis. Essentially, our organization looks to help and support patients that are dealing with rare diseases. And part of that is education and support, especially during these really challenging times with COVID. I know my incredible colleague, Alexandra, has been sending patient support and working with families as they're losing jobs and losing homes, et cetera, trying to make sure that they have a stable base with which to work from during these challenging times. And my role primarily is to look at access to innovative and expensive medicines for these patients in need. In the rare disease space, we have very few treatments, but the treatments that do exist are unbelievably expensive. I deal with access to medications that cost upwards of $1 million per year per patient. And that's not an easy road to navigate for patients when you're looking for reimbursement from a public healthcare system, when you're looking at sort of systems that are set up in our country sometimes to see drugs fail reviews because clinical trials may only have, 6 to 10 to 12 patients enrolled just because the nature of the disease, et cetera. So oftentimes I work with manufacturers and directly with government and on the ground with patients to make sure that those barriers that exist for patients to gain access to these treatments are removed. We're always really, really proud to say that we've never been unsuccessful at gaining access to a rare disease drug for any patient in this country. And that, I think, speaks a lot to the connections that we make within government. within the manufacturing space, and really promoting the patient story in all that we do, so that we can understand that these innovative medicines were created for a purpose. And that's not to sort of line the pockets of pharmaceutical companies solely. It's to make sure that these innovative medicines save the lives that they're supposed to be saved. And so that's the work that I do here in Canada and around the world. I sit with Pat on a few groups down in the United States, 3 or 4 groups, I think, looking at access to pre-approved medicines, expanded access drugs. We're trying to create some seismic shift in terms of access down there. I've been lucky enough to testify in Congress about some of their legislation as it relates to the impact that it has on patients. And finally, I fund a lot of research into these rare diseases. And one in particular, I mentioned the Isaac Foundation. That's an organization that's named after my own son, Isaac, who was diagnosed with a very rare disease, at birth. He's been battling it for 16 years. And at the time, I was a grade school teacher, teaching grade 8. I had this incredible classroom in this incredible school, and I got to teach To Kill a Mockingbird, and I was just in my dream space in life, and my son was diagnosed with this disease, and there were no treatments at the time, certainly no cure, and the road for him was going to be a challenge, and we had to fight to ensure access to a very innovative treatment that had been in clinical trials, to be sort of the lifeboat that he needed in order to find a cure. So at the same time as we were fighting for access, we began funding research into finding a cure for him. And I promised him that I'd do that. I promised him that I'd do that. And that clinical trial that we began funding so long ago is now in the final stages. It's been in humans, and it does look, it's hard to say this word because it means so much. But it does look curative. And I'm lucky that my son was enrolled in that clinical trial a few years ago, a gene therapy trial, and he's doing well. So this is what I do is a way to give voice to the struggle that he goes through every day, but also to sort of honor that struggle that he has, and work to help as many people as I possibly can. So thank you very much for the time.
Well, we're not done, Andrew. So, but we want to hear your voice a lot more in the next bit here, and as well as Pat and Serena. So thanks for sharing, your stories there. Just briefly on my end, I was a caregiver to my dad with Alzheimer's, 10 years. I'm sending my link here. You got all the links of everybody here that I've sent, so you can read up on us a little bit more. But one group that I'm quite involved with is AgeWell, AgeWell National Center of Excellence, and I'm the chair for the Older Adult and Caregiver Advisory Committee. So the voice for many caregivers is what I focus on to make sure that they're involved at the table. Pat, I'm going to ask a question to you as someone who's a huge leader in this space. I started it earlier about the why, okay? And the topic for today is actually on patient engagement in research and also ethics. So we'll talk about ethics a little bit later, but there's many here. TRP has a fair bit of students that are just understanding the space. We're doing all this work, but why is it important, okay, that they involve the patients, right? So that's what I wanted to just throw that out, the very simple question, why? Coming from you there, Pat?
So I'll start. About my first lesson learned. In my early career in nursing, I ran the intensive care unit at Ohio State University Hospital. It was called Room 1167. We had at the time 12 beds, and most of the people came there our death rate was pretty high. This was more than 25 years ago, so the medical tools were not very well advanced, and we had the sickest of the sick patients. We had a little girl in there, and I remember her to this day. Her name was Lisa, and she had systemic lupus. And with systemic lupus, it's a multi-system disease where basically tissue just falls apart, right? And in this particular case, she was there with a GI bleed, and we really couldn't stop her bleeding. We had tried everything, and we couldn't stop her bleeding. at all. So at that time, the rules of my intensive care unit were that family members had 5 minutes visiting hours, 5 minutes to visit for 4 hours a day, 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. And the rationale there was that families would be bothersome to us, right? Because we were so skilled and we had such fancy stuff, and we ran around with, our doing lots of blood work and lots of interventions that we felt were useful. And it was just rocket science, right? That's our perspective. And we were like first line people. So I asked Lisa, because I knew we couldn't save her, what did she want? What was the one thing I could do for her? And I had to put caveats around that. Magic wands don't exist. You know where we are, you're very seriously ill. And she said, take the door off the ICU and let the families in. And if you're doing a procedure that you don't think they can watch, ask them. If they don't want to watch, they can turn around, right? What are you afraid of? And she was absolutely right. We were in the last moments of these people's lives suggesting that what we were doing is more important than what they needed. So I opened that door, took the sign down and said that patients and family members can come in any time of the day or night to visit with the people they love. And so I learned from that moment that the patient voice matters, and it has to be primary. It has to matter all of the time in any circumstance. So when my sons were diagnosed with Duchenne, right, and when I sat in that office, and I think that Andrew and I and Serena and all of us who've ever had this experience, and you as well, Ron, when you sit and get a diagnosis that is catastrophic, right, you remember that day. You remember what the people were wearing, what was said. And this particular physician, I was staring down at the floor, and he said, so what are you thinking about? I said, I'm just praying for miracles. And he said, that's really silly, right? There aren't any. So your sons are going to die. And at that moment, I wanted to strangle him. I think I said something really horrible to him. But again, the patient's voice is so critical here, to listen to them. What were their questions? What were my questions? What was the need? And I think finally, and I'll wrap up, is that I can say that in the rare disease environment, it is the patients who have funded research. It's the patients who's gotten enough money together to find an expert that was willing to go after basic science to begin to categorize this disease of interest. Because you can't get any government money or any investor money or any money on top of that until you have basic science going on. You have enough data to suggest there's a way forward. So we are the underpinnings of research, and our voice has to be throughout that development paradigm. Otherwise, you're going to lose the meaning of what we're trying to achieve.
So thank you there, Pat. What I just heard, which it resonates with all of us here. The one piece that I kind of look at is that we're going to be the loudest voice. Okay, we're the ones that are going to be the champions to deal with the pain points, and we're going to try and move the work forward. One of the things, I just have to sneak in my little story, just what you shared. Same thing when my dad was diagnosed. The doctor with the worst bedside manner just kind of looked at me and said, "Oh, I gave your dad 2 years, get ready." All right. That I have to look for that doctor and thank him because we got my dad to 10 years, right? It depends how we as patients, are able to take what we're given. Okay. But the thing is, sometimes we need other voices. We need the advocates, but you need the voices. Serena, next question is for you. You hinted, you started talking a bit about, you didn't use this word, but I'm going to bring in diversity, okay? Because I kind of felt that, in your conversation that many of us, we could say, that we're going through similar things, similar challenges, but it's very different for everyone. Everyone has their own individual challenge. What I'm curious about during your journey, earlier on, the pain points that you had, okay? How did you approach them? Okay, like if you remember any of those stories, okay, when you're dealing with the system, the healthcare system, and you say, okay, this is where I'm possibly pissed off, or I'm angry with, or this is not right. Okay, if you recall any of those, and what advice you could give, I guess, to our audience here that's listening in.
Sorry, the screen
Just goes on.
froze, so I didn't hear the question.
Okay, so mainly, is there any lessons you can share, okay,
Mm-hmm.
to this crowd? Especially a lot of them are just learning about this right now, that you'd like to say, can you do this better? Okay, what can they improve upon, okay, as they move forward in their careers when it comes to patient engagement and some of the pain points that you might have gone through?
Well, this is for the students.
Sure,
This is
yeah.
me talking to students. Okay,
Okay,
so, well, one thing that we do ask is that, you know, it's not just, you're not just taking care of a patient, you're taking care of a human being. And that human being may have been going through the worst day of their life, or actually a really good time. But, you know, something happened, they're in the hospital, we're in the hospital, we're expected to be treated like a basic, regular human being, you know, not looked at and stigmatized and, you know, because there's a lot of, how would I say, there's a lot of, it's a lot of, it's really the stigma that floats around. And then as soon as we present ourselves in, say, emergency, or, you know, that stigma sticks around. And we can tell, it's something that we can tell that is happening. We can tell because if the caregiver is not coming to us and saying, okay, let's treat your pain, you know, what do you need? What works for you? And stuff like that, then, you know, and then they go ahead and just think, oh, well, you know, we think this type of medication is good for you, this type of medication is good for you. And it's less than what we are used to, less than what our body is used to, less than what our pain needs. Then to me, it's, to me, you're ignoring what the patient is saying. You're ignoring what we're trying to let you know. We're trying to let you know, look, this is the last place we want to be at right now at this point in time, but we're here because we need your help. So we need to be treated like as if, you know, acknowledged, and it needs to be acknowledged that we are in that type of pain or distress. And then on top of that, you know, expedite the treatment. Realize that this is for real, even though it could be an invisible, right? Maybe it's something they cannot see. They cannot see the illness. They cannot see what is really wrong with the patient. We're asking them to really just trust the patient, trust what we say, and acknowledge what we're saying.
One of the things
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, go for it, Andrew.
Because I thought that that was a really salient point and really, really important to point out. I'm often asked by pharmaceutical companies when they first sort of meet us what the magic solution is. How do we get access for all of these people that we've had an opportunity to get access to? And I always say that the answer is bringing everything back down to a level where people understand that we're all human. And we all have a responsibility as humans to help other humans. And to highlight that, I remember sitting with Minister of Health in a province, which will not be named, but that person's up for re-election right now. So you can do some research. And he asked, you know, we're dealing with a drug, 3 siblings needed access to this drug. And this drug probably would cost upwards of, for all 3 children on an annual basis, $2.5 million per year. And the Minister of Health sat down with me and I said, listen, we both know that you're going to provide the access to this drug that's been through clinical trials and is approved, et cetera. But why the back and forth? And he said, well, you know what, how am I going to tell people that I'm going to pay for this expensive drug that clinical trials show Billy's going to walk an extra 70 meters in his life? Well, how do we get that? And explaining to him that that 70 meters on paper for him is the difference between Billy being able to walk from their front door to their own car, being able to get in that vehicle and drive to their own place of work, not needing to have help or access from somebody at school to get to and use the bathroom. And that quality of life change, that reintegration into society that Billy had not had an opportunity to be integrated into before because of this treatment, is unbelievably important. And he asked a really good question. I thought that was a dumb question, but he asked a really good question, and he said, well, what do I do when we're not 100% sure that this drug works? And I put it back on him by saying, well, tell me this, what happens if you get diagnosed with cancer tomorrow? Walk me through what that looks like. He said, well, I'd ideally get on treatment within, a few weeks, and we do our course of therapy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we go there. He'd have not very many barriers as opposed in comparison to this patient with a rare disease. And the same is true even if that cancer is not curable. We provide this glimmer of hope. We provide this level of basic understanding and compassion because you are a human, and you have every right to be able to be given any supports that we have that may make your journey better. And I think that was really important, Serena, to be able to hit that home, that we are people first, and we have this ability to help each other. And oftentimes in textbooks that doesn't come through. Oftentimes the decision makers at hospitals or at the government level, that doesn't come through because it's a file and it's a number and it's a price. And I think that the true success is coming back to that common denominator. And I think that was really important of you to say. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Andrew, I agree with that. We don't talk enough about the humanists that Serena, you brought up there. We have Kathleen just commenting to say thanks for that she liked your use of language, right? Human is a word that's not used a lot, I guess, whenever we're patients, right? Patients, caregivers, right? But that piece and what Andrew, you just emphasized, from our end, I think when patients are around each other, we communicate as humans to each other, right? We're really grounded in how we care, how we talk to each other. Now, knowing that, Andrew, this is now to you, Pat, okay? When it comes to research now, okay, because part of that is, yes, we're communicating as humans, but there is data that needs to be gathered, okay? We need to do that research piece. I'm curious there, Pat, your views about the barriers that the entry barriers that's there for patients to be involved in research, okay? And maybe some tips and suggestions that you can suggest again to our audience as they move forward in their careers.
I think in rare diseases, patients, with social media, with the ability to connect to communities and to other people, I think that the barriers are decreasing or declining some. I think that, and again, with a caveat, is that some people just don't have the ability based on where they live or the culture they have or the education they have or the philosophy they have to be involved in research. And I think that is up to us to make sure we reach out beyond the people that are regularly gathered together on social media. So I think that's one issue of who has access to research. So I think this is a challenge that we all have to reach out into communities where people will have less access to participate in research or little access. I think that the access to investigators, what often is the storyline that you hear in rare diseases is there's a diagnosis, and often exactly what you've experienced, therapeutic nihilism about, we don't know much about this, it's rare, it's ultra rare, and there's no one looking at it. And then through social media and through the ability to connect, these individuals are getting connected to communities through various Patients Like Me is one of them. Every Life Foundation is another, National Organization of Rare Diseases. There are opportunities to connect and then find your community, find your us, if you will. And once you find your us, then you can get into the realm of being an investor in research or a participant in research, or involved in to the degree that you have the ability and the desire to. So I think there is, in rare diseases, there are pathways to participate. I don't know, Andrew and Serena, if you feel the same way, but I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of opportunity to participate in research, and also to be able to not only participate but shape that research and shape what those clinical trials look like, etc. I know of a trial that almost failed because they had an issue with the 4-minute stair climb test, and in that test, it's seeing how fast and how far patients could climb certain sets of stairs. And the assumption from the company was that they wouldn't be able to do many flights of stairs or many stairs over that 4-minute time period. But what they neglected to understand was that the disease itself was very heterogeneous, and some patients could and some patients couldn't. And so some of those patients that were participating in the clinical trial met what their expectation was. They couldn't climb X number of stairs, but the ones that could ran out of stairs. And so all of a sudden, your data, you have a problem with your data, because you have to say, well, they ran out of stairs, and now we have to sort of take an average of things, and FDA doesn't really like when you change things. And so it impacted what that clinical trial looked like. And for a company to have not thought of that shows me that they didn't include patients in that trial design, in those ideas, even though they used patients in all of their brochures and their websites and their patient stories, etc. They were using that patient to show their story, not to hear their story or hear what they need. So I think that it's really important. Yes, we can get patients to participate in research or be a part of research, but really truly letting them craft and shape research is really important as well.
Thanks, Andrew. Serena, do you have any thoughts on this there? Oh, Serena, you're still on mute.
Yes. Well, I see in our community that there has been opportunities to participate in trials, and the problem is they're not able to get enough people to participate. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. We have been told, I think there is a website where you can take a look at what clinical trials are going on, which ones are needed, which ones need bodies to participate and stuff like that. But I don't think it's been explained clear enough for everybody to understand that this is something that would potentially can benefit you and everybody else that is, going through the same thing as you. And I think it's very important that the public does know what's going on, and especially those that are in the trial understand, I think, a little bit more than usual. I think what they just look at is that, oh, we're just going to be guinea pigs and that's it. Nothing will come out of it. But, it's the education. It's the education awareness that's lacking.
I'd support that there. A lot of the work that we do or that we want, in the end, it's about impact, right? It's not just about creating work and having patients come through here, through research. But a lot of the work we're trying to do is how can we increase the impact from the voices of the patients? So just some themes that I kind of heard around this, and then I'm going to kind of pick some of the questions I'm seeing on the chat here. But just one thing, tokenism. I'm going to bring that word up. Okay, tokenism, that let's not just bring in patients just so that we could check it off, on our research that we have a patient involved. I'm sure each of you probably has a story around that or has experienced that or has seen that. So I'm going to just come back. You know what, actually, before I come back to our group, I'm actually going to ask a question. Joseph's punching in a whole bunch of questions here. So I'm trying to keep up here. Let's start with, you know what, actually, Joseph, if you can, we don't have to follow the rules here. If you can turn on your mic and pick the question you want to ask, because I think you've sent us like 7 questions.
Well,
Joseph?
honestly, the questions aren't for me.
Yes, for the group.
It's just, especially for the trainees and students and young researchers in the crowd, everyone talks about, well, how do we access patients? I talked to people the other day in a hospital. They've stopped a lot of their work involving patients because they don't have access, because during COVID, things have changed. Even before COVID, we always have the same question from students. Well, I'm thinking about a project, but I can't really talk to anyone without an REB. But in order to get an REB, I need to have a project. So I'm just going to make something up or copy something from online. And I don't really need to talk to patients or cancer patients, they want a cure. That's it. I mean, why do we need to bother them or talk to them? We're researchers. We know better. So I mean, this is a chance to ask these kinds of questions. How do we work to enable somehow the conversations to be had? I mean, I can take it in many ways. 5 years ago, people wouldn't allow online discussions with patients because REBs said it wasn't, appropriate way of gathering data.
So Joseph, we'll bring in the ethics piece in a moment here. Let's put ethics aside just on that question. Right now, I guess let's open it up for all 3 of you, especially with COVID. Okay, as ugly as it is, I've always said that, there is opportunity to move the work forward, okay, a little faster, right? So your thoughts, Andrew, I'm going to pick on you first here, I guess, to Joseph's comments and questions there about involving.
Yeah. Listen, patients not only can be connected with and can be found, but they want to be found. I think that's a really important question. We'll get to the comment push ethics aside for a bit, because both Pat and I, our lives are surrounded by some of the most famous bioethicists on the planet who's on CNN every single day, and we have to stand up for him and say you can never push the ethics of anything aside. But there are patients that are on ethics review boards, etc. And this idea that patients can't be connected with, especially during a time with COVID. Listen, I'm meeting 70, I don't know how many people are on, 70 new different people today, all within, an hour span. And we sit in front of our computers often. And, myself, I receive notices now from pharmaceutical companies all across the planet asking how they can be in touch with patients so that they can better understand their condition, their experiences, their day-to-day life. And it's mostly because of talks like this. It's mostly because of experiences like this and questions like this that younger researchers and even sort of old hats in the space understand that their projects, their aims for a cure are enriched by making sure that those patient voices are included, not just in the storytelling of things, but at the decision-making level. I saw somebody in the chat, and I just piped up quickly, showing that the SPORE grant programs that CIHR is looking at. And these are centers of excellence from across the country. And each province is hoping to set up sort of SPORE support units, which is supporting patient-oriented research from a level of making sure that all team members and researchers and decision makers see patient-oriented research at its finest. And I like that comment because as I explained to some of you, I literally just spent the last 5 hours looking at SPORE grants, looking at making sure that we can make sure that these units can get set up. And I can tell you that my main comment on these really amazing applications that came in was, you still only are leaving space on your working group for one patient voice. Well, why is that? Because the patient voice is unbelievably different. Even on this panel right now, we have a caregiver and we have, we have a patient, and the patient experience is unbelievable and unique and important. And the caregiver experience is unbelievable and unique and important, but they're very different. They're very different, and those perspectives need to be included together. So why are we only including one spot for somebody that's had lived experience? And past that, there's different types of patients. There's patients and caregivers that go through the ultra rare space. And I think that that's important as well, not to just have, a token spot for a patient. And so people like me are enhancing these SPORE grant applications and SPORE processes by ensuring that that lens is broadened even more. And I think it takes work, but it's definitely something that we can do.
Thanks, Andrew. The patient voice is not just, again, telling our stories. We're actually, many are involved in shared decision-making, right? On that team. Some of them are even leading some of the research out there. There's just some links there to, if anyone wants to learn more about SPORE, and Chris Klinger also shared that there. There's the Ontario SPORE Support Unit that I'm actively now part of there, but there's a national one there that CIHR talks about a fair bit, so there's some links there. Pat, if you can chime in on this here, let's bring in the ethics conversation a bit. Yeah, Andrew, you're smiling there. And I don't know, Serena, how much you want to talk about ethics, but just give me your thoughts around ethics, around patient engagement and research. It's open for whatever you want to say.
Well, so first of all, I want to complete Andrew's thought about, I don't have anything to do with the SPORE grants, but in legislation in the United States, when National Institutes of Health does a grant review, they have to have patients on that grant review process. If you're submitting a grant, you have to have patients. And it's not just one token patient that you seem to have run into on the street. It has to also cross the trajectory of the disease. So in our disease, it has to have a new diagnosis and an adolescent that represent obviously the caregiver represents the adolescent voice, but when you get to adults living with Duchenne, they have a far different view than their parents, or certainly a far different understanding of their disease than a mom with a new diagnosis or a dad with a new diagnosis. So you need the whole trajectory it can't just be a token patient or someone who has a little experience. You have to have the breadth of that disease represented so that the needs are met of these people who carry this disease and carry this burden across its trajectory. So that's one thing. In terms of ethics, Andrew and I belong to several groups that we talk about ethics all day, right? But in particular, one of the issues that we find are these amazing, and I too don't use the word curative very well because it carries so much weight and so much importance and relevance to patients. But in our disease, when we saw gene therapy trials begin, and the gene therapy trials, first of all, have been 30 years waiting, right? When the gene was cloned and people were talking about gene therapy, it was, oh, this will be soon. But soon turned out to be a very long path to include when the field shut down with the Jesse Gelsinger death. And we all thought it was soon, and then Jesse Gelsinger happened, and then for 10 years, nothing much happened. So now it's upon us, right? So the first companies that started off were in open label studies looking for the right patient, whatever that's supposed to mean. But it turns out, as we looked at who the right patient, turns out that the right patients were people with significant resources, right? To get to the place, to live in the place, to be next to the people, and I wouldn't be surprised if that involved in some cases maybe some support for research. So it was really troubling because when I thought about, and I knew that if my boys were alive, which they are not, I might have done all those same things to get first in line. And so it didn't surprise me, because as a parent who loves their children, you want to do the very best for them. Andrew's promise to Isaac, my promise to my own sons was, I'll do something, not just for you, but for everyone, right? So that's our commitment, I think, as human beings, to help each other and to have an experience and to spread that out. But I did worry about, how are we going to deliver these therapies in a fair and equitable way? Not only the therapies once they're approved, but how do we do trials that are fair and equitable and representative of this population? So this is, one of the issues that we, Andrew and I, and the people he's talking about who know far more about ethics than we will ever know, who are on CNN. So we go to them and say, so what happens next, right? And so what if these therapies are approved at $3 million, right? How and who's going to have access, and what are we going to do to make sure that it's accessible? And the last comment I'll make is, one of the pharmaceutical companies came to us because we launched newborn screening in New York State for Duchenne, with the idea of going to the RUSP and getting it on the RUSP by 2022 or 2023, fingers crossed. So we launched this newborn screening, and then one of the companies came to us and said, we want to do global newborn screening. And we said, okay, what does that mean to you? What's global? So, and if we do global newborn screening, there are countries where we can't even get a diagnosis, because diagnosis is impossible, where in sub-Saharan Africa, it's impossible. So are you telling me you're going to do newborn screening when these, and are you going to deliver a $4 million therapy or $3 million therapy as well? What is the, you have to have someplace, if you're going to make a diagnosis, for people to land, and it has to be fair and equitable and accessible. So those are the things we grapple with, and I do think every human being that is diagnosed deserves to land in expert care and have all access to the therapies that could make a meaningful difference in their lives. That's just should be the law.
You're bang on, and your comment about Pat, newborn screening, that same health minister, who shall not be named, but is up for re-election right now.
So do your research
around here. He said to me, "There's always I always call it my Steve Jobs Apple moment, because I have these conversations with industry or government or whomever, and there's always, well, I have you here. There's just one more thing," and this was his just one more thing moment. He said, "Listen, I'm getting a lot of heat to approve newborn screening for these 10 indications. Tell me what I need to do." I said, well, let's answer the question with a question. If you find these diseases when these children are born through your newborn screening process, are you going to then pay for the treatments? Because I'm fighting you right now to gain access to a treatment that's gone through Health Canada, CADTH review. It's been through reimbursement negotiations for 18 months, and you're still having problem agreeing to pay for it. Are you gonna provide access to these treatments? And he looked at me and said, "Therein lies my problem, doesn't it?" And it is something that it is a question. It's laudable to say, let's newborn screen everybody and find everything that's out there, and then we can treat them. But then it falls on the people that are in charge of reimbursement and going ahead saying, yeah, we found them, but now we don't want to pay for it. And so that's a big problem in terms of ethics. Pat and I, we literally can chat about this forever, and we try to make sure that it's at the core of all of our decisions. And we sit on a group called GE2P2 in the United States, and it's a small nonprofit that we're part of the Independent Bioethics Advisory Council. And I always describe this, Pat, you're the first time you get to hear this Canadian describe it. I always describe it as the 9 smartest people in America, plus me.
That's exactly what I say. The 9 smartest people, and then they've invited me. So
yeah, and we get to be a part of that. And our Independent Bioethics Advisory Council, we are a location where pharmaceutical companies and the like come to us when they have very pressing ethical issues. And it's not just bioethicists on our panel. Our panel includes patient voices, Pat and myself, a pharmacist, who looks at if we're going to approve access to an investigational medication for a 4-year-old that's a breast cancer drug that maybe there's only data in mice to suggest that it could work. He's responsible for talking about the toxicity of any type of redosing and changing of things. We have Art Kaplan, who's probably the most famous ethicist on the entire planet, and Alison Bateman House. And we really bring all of our unique lenses of a challenging situation together to remind ourselves, is this the best path forward for this patient? And we always kind of end discussions reminding ourselves that sometimes there are worse things than death. And when you have these innovative medicines that are pre-investigational, et cetera, there is a time when you can get it into patients outside of clinical trials, et cetera. But some of the most difficult questions that come to us from these pharmaceutical companies are mind-boggling, because we always look at them and it always comes back to, do they not have an ethicist on their team that can understand that this never should have got to this point? And so I highly encourage researchers at an early stage, when you're looking at even coming up with a project, to make sure that you have the voice of an ethicist, or I like to call Pat and I patient ethicists rather than bioethicists, so that you can understand what some of the challenges may be down the line. And you see some of these challenges now with patient voices being drowned out by other patient voices, with GoFundMe campaigns to pay for gene therapies that cost $3.2 million. And yes, it's laudable that you had your voice raised by Ryan Reynolds, but what you did was you jumped that queue of that other patient that didn't have those resources and had to be quiet because they thought they were next, etc. So it is like I said, we can talk ethics forever, and I won't take all the bandwidth up here by doing so, but keep it in mind as you're doing your research moving forward.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm pretty sure we could stay here for the next like 6 to 10 hours just talking on all this. Like this will never be enough time. Serena, I just wanted to see if you wanted to chime in. We heard from Andrew and Pat from a very high level where they've been working, around this. But I'm just curious, you as a patient, just even as a patient, is ethics an issue or concern on your end? I didn't think of ethics, for many years. It just going through my journey until I became more of an advocate. But I'm just curious about, your thoughts around it, if you can chime in on that very at the patient level. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if, I think the thing that we try to understand is, okay, is the doctor trying their very best? Is that person letting us know all of the options, all of the information to make a sound decision? So sometimes we feel like that's not happening, where, we weren't told certain things, and, how that could have helped us, or, like there's a distrust. There's a distrust between the patient and the healthcare provider a lot of times, only because of the fact that, when we're looking for treatment, or when we need the treatment, is the treatment supposed to benefit us or benefit them? The way that we get treated, is it to benefit them or is it to benefit us? And most of the time we feel like it's not to benefit us, and it shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't even have that feeling at all. I think, in my early days, I saw that, the parents would just go by whichever word the doctor says, right? So wouldn't question, wouldn't doubt what they have to say. But then when I grow up now and I see what's going on myself, I feel like, yes, the trust isn't there. Um, it'd be good if things were explained
Okay.
as to why they're going a certain way. Why do they think a different way is better? And how it will benefit us. And most of the time, we don't get that explanation because there are times like, we're under heavy medication. So we're not able to comprehend or, soak in everything that they're trying to tell us. It's, it, that's why we need our advocate. That's why we need somebody with us. I know during COVID, it must have been horrible for families. And I've seen it myself where I couldn't even accompany one of our clients to an ER visit. But if they explain things and let us know why, or like we want to be able to be a part of that decision as well, that thought process as well.
The one word that I'm always going to pick up, and from what you said there, Serena, is trust. Trust
Yes.
in who
Yes.
we're working with. What's the intentions? Yeah. So trust is a big deal. So thank you. So,
Can I, because you set the precedent, I'm going to jump in and I just want to ask Serena a little bit more. I think this is really important because, so full disclosure, I've been part of longitudinal studies as a patient as well, and sometimes I find that it's not even just that they don't explain. It's you are standing there naked or in a robe while they are measuring or doing what they have to do and making that decision, even if I mean, it's horrible. I've been in situations where residents or whoever come in and they treat you like an idiot, and like you can't even open your hand, or you can't, they have to explain things, and there's this condescending tone that I'm the expert and you better do this. And why are you even asking that question? That's so stupid. And you're standing there, and at least when I go in, so I'm privileged in in the faculty of medicine, and they don't know that when I'm stripped down in a gown and don't know any of that, but I am. Other people who aren't, how horrible is it when these people look down at you without any sensitivity about who you are? And the fact is that half the time they don't understand what they're doing for these clinical trials. And what's worse, and this is something where it gets back to, actually, Pat, you told me this a number of years ago, and I've been thinking about this for a very long time. What's the value of patience in research? And I think this is I'm getting to my question to Serena. What I realized is that when you were talking about the walk test and how it was all about what the researchers wanted, not what the patients wanted, and how in the early years when you were talking about your sons, that many parents weren't actually even talking about a cure. They were talking about living with the condition. And in my own case, I once had it before things progressed. Once someone said to me, I don't care what happens. I don't really care what the doctors say, as long as I can still go out and not be embarrassed or not have my face involved. And that's not a cure, but from a patient's perspective, now I understand that. So Serena, have you been able to shape the direction of research in some way? Like, are there things that you want people to pay attention to?
That's a very good question. I have not been involved with research, even though I would love to, because we feel like, you know, research on sickle cell alone, you know, it would be nice if there was attention paid to that. It's been around for over 100 years. There should be something going on in Canada. You know, I, you know, I know some people that has gone through some trials, but you know, it's something that I would want to see more of, and more involvement from, like, say, the NGOs, so Sickle Cell Association of Ontario, you know, Lupus Canada, like all the, you know, all these different organizations involved with the research as well, because they have tons of information. They have tons of information to share. That can help shape how research goes as well on a certain subject, right? So involving you know, organizations out there as well as the patients, even the families. I don't know, but definitely the individuals should be involved, and definitely the NGOs that are out there that are helping these people.
So, Serena, there is a question that was on the chat that I think is also something that we need to deal with, and just upfront say, it's been around for 100 years, and sickle cell anemia is not front and center, and patients are not being involved or asked or discussed. And so the obvious question is it because of whom it affects?
Yes, I believe so. I believe, you know, this is the safe space. I believe the reason why there is not enough attention paid to this disease is because they feel it is dubbed a Black disease. It is not a Black disease. It's a genetic disease. So anybody can have sickle cell. Anybody can have the trait. Anybody can pass it off. You know what I mean? So it's just predominantly Black people that are saying that they have it. You know, there's others that have it, but they don't say that they have sickle cell disease because they don't want it to relate to the fact that, oh, it's a Black disease. You know, people will be asking, well, how did you get it? You know, and stuff like that. But I think because of that, there is no money in it whatsoever. And, you know, there's people in the community that are trying their best to say, okay, I'm going to give money to research for sickle cell. I'm going to give money to research for sickle cell. But then we haven't heard about this research. And that's why I said the organization should be involved as well. But, you know, because then we can reach out to our clients and say, okay, there's research going on right now that we think that, you know, you guys should try to participate in. We have the clients, you know, they should be reaching out to us and letting us know all these things. So yeah, I feel there is a lot of reasons why, and one of them is because they think it's a Black disease.
So thanks, Joseph, for your comments and questions and discussion with Serena there. For the next part here, we have still about 45 minutes. We're going to go through a lot of the questions from the chat, but I'm going to ask the three panelists here, because there's a lot of great comments and even specific questions. If you yourself, the three panelists, can scan through the chats, because I don't want to just be the one that's just picking my favorites here or what I think I might be missing some here. So take a look at that. But while you're looking, I'm going to ask one of the questions that I have here, and it's open for any of you to answer. Now, how do we give patients a chance to shape research? What tools can we give them? So it's more of a general question, just about patient engagement. I just wanted to chime in. One thing Pat, you said earlier, and I agree, patient engagement in research, I believe, just I've been in the space for about 5 years, has been growing, right? And Andrew, you might be able to say the same thing, and Serena, but I believe it's growing. So we're moving in a good direction. But can we get better? Of course. So for that question, if you have any thoughts, how do we give patients a chance to shape research, and any tools? So anyone can chime in.
Well, I have to say, I was on the minister's PFAC, the Patient Family Advocacy Committee, and that was a bit challenging. I mean, it was really good that they were able to put together a group of people, patients, caregivers, all of that. And we talked about how we can improve the healthcare system, improve certain areas of the healthcare system. And unfortunately, that stopped before the year started, I think, was our last meeting. Unfortunately, the minister stopped the whole project, I guess you would call it. And but we made strides, because we came up with, a patient declaration. So it was really focusing on patient-centered care and the involvement of patients in decision makings. So a lot of other organizations were there as well. We were able to recognize those issues, recognize what it is that we're expecting from the healthcare system, and we put that together. That was the only thing that was really acknowledged out of the group. We were together for about a year and a half, I think it is, the group, I think, started 2 years ago, and I came in the middle of it, and we did that for about a year and a half. I feel like, yes, we were talking about that, and trying to end hallway medicine. So that, I had stories for that too, hallway medicine, and all the time. I could remember one of my last experiences that, they hung up everything. They hung up my meds and the IV and everything, but left me in the hallway. Left me with morphine dripping in the hall, not being attended to. I didn't know that's what it was called, but that happens a lot, where we're just left at the side and not being taken care of, not being attended to. We don't feel that our issue is important enough to be, monitored and stuff like that. It's a whole bunch of little things that you kind of notice for yourself and realize, oh, okay, I see. So that patient that came in after me, who, has maybe a sprained foot, is getting more attention than me. Okay. You see these things and you try to understand why it's happening. Yeah, it's I may have gone off topic there, but it's okay.
You're allowed.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Serena, just really quickly, while I have it in my mind, Pat and I had a presentation to one of our groups a few weeks ago by Dr. Andrew Campbell, and he is the director of the Comprehensive Sickle Cell Program at Nationwide Children's Hospital. And listening to you speak is reminding me of that incredible presentation that he gave. And I believe that your experience and your activism would go hand in hand with the work that he's doing, looking at clinical trials for gene therapy for sickle cell disease, et cetera. And we'll get you hooked up together after this, because I think you'd be a
That would
good
be wonderful.
connection.
Yeah, it would be great. And I had this experience, Serena, with a company that was developing gene therapy in sickle cell disease. And
Okay.
they asked this young woman to talk about her sickle cell disease. And it was one of the most striking presentations I've ever seen in front of this company. I'll tell you what happened. She walked in and she was beautiful, dressed beautifully, and she came in and said, "I have pain." And you could see people sort of backing up like, I don't see it, right?
Yes.
So then it was a two-part. So we presented in the morning our diseases and what they were like, and she came in and, as I say, she was dressed up and talked about sickle cell disease and how she was in immense pain that day, and they were listening, but they were not buying the pain story, right? So in the afternoon when we spoke, she came in a wheelchair. She had one shoe off and one shoe on. She had her hair disheveled. And she said, "I'm in terrible pain," with tears in her eyes. And everyone was like, "Oh, what can we do for you?" And she said, "I'm the same person. You have just judged by the way I dressed, whether or not I had pain, without considering asking me a question when I was dressed up. Where was the pain? How bad was it? What could you do to help me?" And now you're like falling all over yourself, but I'm the same person. So I was so moved by that presentation. That was terrific, because and I'm blaming myself as well. In medicine, sometimes when I ran the ER and worked in the ICU, how people look is sometimes your first impression, and you make a decision about their disease and their status without really sitting down and saying, "Tell me more," right?
Yes.
Tell me more. Never mind what you've got on or don't have on. Tell me more. So anyway, I do think Dr. Campbell would be wonderful, and I think you would
Yeah.
be amazing with him.
I mean, that experience right there that you're mentioning that she presented is what I go through all the time. I do it all the time. I could be in my bed in the middle of the night, and usually my pain comes on, say 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'm deep in sleep. It interrupts my sleep. I know when it does that, I know I have to go to the hospital because it's really bad. It was manifesting throughout my sleep, and finally so intense it wakes me up. So I know I'm going to the hospital. But I have my head tie on, I have my jogging pants on and stuff like that. I actually take it off, comb my hair, fix up myself, dress appropriately, so then I will be looked at, so I can be taken serious when I walk through that door. But it's interesting that they could look at me and say, "Well, nothing's wrong with you," and my pain's 10 out of 10. I've lived with this disease all my life. I can make a 10 out of 10 look like, a walk in the park, right? So when we say that we're in excruciating pain, but they don't see it in our face because we're so used to it. We're so used to hiding it because sometimes most of us are just, feeling shameful. It's mainly shameful because you don't want to cry in front of people. Me, you'll just see a tear running down my eye. You know I'm in pain. Like my family will know I'm in pain. My friends, my colleagues will know just by seeing that one tear come down. Other than that, I'm talking away. I'm doing this because I'm trying to distract from the excruciating pain. But they don't understand. I'll give you an example. One time, we also speak to the students at Humber, the 3rd and 4th year nursing students at Humber. So when we speak to them now on a panel and we tell them we're in pain, somebody said, "But we wouldn't believe that you're in pain unless you're on fire. We wouldn't believe that you're in that 12 out of 10 pain unless you're on fire." And then that day I realized, okay, we already knew it's an invisible disease. We already knew that pain is invisible. You're not going to be able to measure it. You have to understand that when we say it's at a certain point, that's where it is. Or it could be, or actually worse. Because we try to avoid the ER. If we end up in the ER, that means we're desperate. We're in a crisis. We are we're in a different world during that time, and we just want help. We were there because we need the help, and we know we can get the help, but then are you listening?
And then there's such a stigma associated with pain medicines, right?
Oh,
That,
yes.
Yeah. So we have all these built-in biases, I think, sometimes in medicine, that we tend to make a judgment call about what we assume this patient is feeling or
Yes.
thinking, right? So.
Yes.
Thanks, Pat. One thing I'm noticing here, and for the audience to be aware of, patients cheer for each other. Here's an example of, the panelists here trying to support each other, okay, to move their work forward. Serena, I believe you said you wanted to get more involved with research. I think that's what you said. So here you got two other patient partners trying to connect you. So that's what I love. That's something TRP is known for, making the connections, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something beautiful. I'm going to answer one question while I have Pat and Andrew and Serena, but Pat, you'll be next. You get to pick your question from the chats in a second here, Pat, and then Andrew yourself, and then Serena. So take a look. But I'm going to just chime in on one question. It's what about recruiting patients who do not find a website in English accessible? Language barriers. So it's not just language barriers. There's a whole bunch of barriers. From language, social determinants of health, digital determinants of health. That's my space. Do a lot of work around technology. So just people that don't have access to technology, how do we deal with that? I'm going to be blunt from my perspective is there's not an exact answer at this point, right, for all of this, right? It's a lot of work, especially now with COVID. Resources are being pulled here and there for different priorities. But for me, it comes down to a lot of effort from the champions, from the voices, not just from patients, also from yourself, okay? You being at the table to actually make an impact for those communities, okay? So if English is an issue, again, my space of the dealing with, let's say, the Alzheimer's Society. So they have a lot of material in at least 20 plus languages. Okay? But that takes resources to do that. I believe getting involved in the community, okay, with whatever that community is you're working with, trying to access, whether it's rural, could be a rural issue. You really have to kind of just find the champions and support them, okay, and find. So I'm not really giving you a perfect answer. I don't think this is something we can easily solve for, but that's just my response to that. So I'm going to pass it to Pat in a second. I'm just going to acknowledge all of you here in case I forget to do it later. Like there's Linda chiming in, Kathleen, Andrew. Who else we have? We have Azadeh, Evan. So who else do we have? Miriam. So a whole bunch of you. We can't respond to all of it. But Pat, do you have a comment or a question you want to tackle?
I'll make it just a comment on outcomes data. So and I have to say that in our advocacy organization too, we are very interested in data. We certainly believe that patients don't want to take drugs that aren't going to work for them, right? But I think it is trying to nail down about how do you understand what their benefit risk is? How do you weigh that? How is that weighed in the regulatory environment? So we've done preference studies in our community. So two different things we do: preference studies to understand the benefit and risk, and that is not just in a single patient group. That is across the trajectory of the disease, because as you get more involved in your disease, you may be or may not be willing to take on more risk for a degree of benefit. So I think preference studies are really important, and this is where you do engage that patient voice and you learn from them across the trajectory of the illness at what time they're willing to take what risk for what degree of benefit. So I think those kinds of rigorous studies are really important in a variety of ways to collect the patient voice, to certainly be able to report about that voice into the regulatory authorities and into the payer community, which is, the other side of this in terms of providing access. So the other way we've gotten patients involved, and there are a number of ways, but to really get this international voice, because this rare disease is global, and certainly the U.S. voice or the Canadian voices are not sufficient. You want a global voice. So what we did is created a community advisory board. So the community advisory board that we stood up and for which I chair is representative of now 16 countries, and all ages and stages of disease in 16 countries. So we set up to collect data and ask the question of companies that were in this space. We believe that, our question was, or our thought process was, that we could shape a protocol and decrease the number of amendments to that protocol, thereby saving the companies money at the end of the day. We would be able to facilitate the protocol and the recruitment for that study, and basically compress the timeline toward submission for approval. So we've now been in operation for 5 years. We are now doing all virtual meetings with companies. They have come to depend on us. They come to us 2 and 3 times a year, and we bring on this patient voice to discuss the protocol. So we are shaping protocols. We are also informing them of the need to support these patients through these very difficult trials. So most of them have a 24/7 hotline. So should the patients have a question or an issue or a concern, my son's vomiting all night, is that related to this particular intervention, or is this the flu, or how do I manage this best? And we've also insisted that this will lessen the social media discussions about whether their particular drug works. And I'm happy to say we've now met with 21 companies. These representatives have been able to shape these protocols. They consistently have their voice involved in this. We've helped recruit and established a basic trust between these representatives from these countries and the companies that have come to us. So I think that there's all sorts of ways and models to develop the opportunity for the patient voice to be directly inserted into clinical research and clinical trials development and the regulatory process. And now we're also, like Andrew, in the access environment where we can discuss and make the case for access to expensive therapies.
Thanks there, Pat, for chiming in on that there. Just need to, Joseph, I know you're still on here. Just doing a time check here. Do we have half an hour, or are we finishing up?
Well, it's really up to everyone. I think it just Zoom 2 hours is a long time. I find so.
Fair enough. So,
but
how about we get just a few comments from Andrew, if there's anything you wanted to chime in on, and
Sure.
Serena as well. Any last
Sure. I actually had planned on answering Joseph. He asked a question about how can we ensure equity in research, and I think the most important thing for researchers to understand is not to go into their research with preconceived notions of who the patient is. I think it's very important to sort of go in with an open mind and understanding that you need to learn who those patients are, and you'll understand that somebody like Serena's 10 on the pain scale is the same as somebody else's at 1,000. I remember my own son had a 13-hour, 14-hour spinal cord decompression surgery. Jim Rucka looked after it, and Jim Rucka had to sit in the same position for 14 hours straight in order to get it, because it was so difficult. And the next day I had seen that the medical team was pulling him off of his morphine dose. And I said, well, why? And they said, well, he reported his pain as being, a 2 right now. I said, oh my God, a two for Isaac is 1,000 for you. You have to be able to keep them on. And so that preconceived understanding of what your scale is different from what the patient's scale is. But the same is true in terms of who the patient is when you're looking at ensuring people can participate in research. And there was another quick question about, should this be a one-way street? I think it's very important and very vital that I want you to understand that it's not. It's not just the patients reaching out, trying to be involved. Pat and I are so busy fielding questions from physicians and companies and researchers alike, asking us these very questions. How can we get the patient voice or the patient story or patient participation? It is a seismic change that's happening, and it takes time to see that in the research as we move forward, because if it's happening now, then the outcomes take place down the road when these drugs get approved and these drugs have easier paths to reimbursement. So I want people to understand that this isn't a one-way street, and I think we're seeing a lot of change in that regard now. So.
Thank you, Andrew. Serena, any last comments from your side?
I think I saw a question about if the onus is on the patient to know everything, and obviously not. It's just the patient knows their body, knows knows exactly what works for them and what doesn't. So if the patient's trying to inform especially in ER, the doctor's not going to know who you are. So, just to let them know that we understand what's going on with us right now, and but at this point, we're just letting you know that this, and this works. Let's try that first, kind of thing, because I've had I will tell a doctor what works for me, and then they'll be like, okay, well, let's try half of that dose. Let's try half. And I was like, what? Well, that doesn't make any sense to me, because I'm telling you what is working. That needs to hit my pain, or at least numb it, so I can have a clear conversation with you about everything else. So if I'm telling you that this is what I need, in order to just be calm and have a conversation, then I would think that they would try that with, and supervise, like have somebody watching us or whatever, if they are concerned because of the high dosage. But to us, it's not a high dosage whatsoever. It's just something to just knock the pain for a second so we can function. It's something that we've been taking for the rest of all our lives. So, when it's not like, we know what's going on. We know what affects us and what doesn't. So, we always, we just don't want a battlefield anymore. It's like a battlefield all the time. We're telling them this and they're saying this to us, and it's back and forth, and then, oh, we're not compliant, and who knows what they're writing in our records and stuff like that. We're just trying to show no, we're an expert in our body. But if you do have, if we tried it and it doesn't work, and you have a new way of treating a certain symptom or whatever, then sure, let's try it out. But I think it's when our voice is not being heard is the issue. And that's all we ask for. We ask for our voice to be heard in any which way. Doesn't matter, research, in the ER, in our, pain management, in our care. Because imagine how it feels when you're telling them something, but they turn around and tell you something else. Feels like they weren't listening at all, and they cut you out of the decision making, cut you out of everything, and then we just feel worthless, and we just feel like, this. Why are we here? I might as well just stay home and try and deal with it myself, when really we need professional help by that point. So. No, it's not on the onus of the patient to know everything. It would be great to come across doctors and healthcare teams that actually are versed on the disease itself and is able to take care of you on a whole. Because for us, it's not just doctor's appointments. There's therapy, there's massage therapy, there's chiropractor, there's kinesiology. There's all these different types of therapies that is needed in that care team as well. And they should all be versed.
So thanks, Serena. The key one that I want everyone to remember as we finish here is listening and respecting the patient's voice. That's where a lot of this starts. So thank you to our three panelists here, to Pat, Serena, and Andrew. I enjoyed myself just learning from all of you. We learned from each other. To the attendees, one of the first Zoom webinars that I couldn't keep up with, the chats. I'm usually good at this, but there's way more than I can handle. I am going to Google the minister that's up for election. That's on my checklist.
Andrew, you can say his name.
I'm sure
he's learned a lot. Trust me, he's learned a lot.
Yeah, so I'm going to Google that. And yes, just to say thanks to the TRP program. I've been a mentor in residence for the past, I'm not sure, I think it's 3 years. Pat, whenever we met, that's when I kind of came on board. And thank you to Joseph and the team, and to many of you who are the students that are in this very unique year. Thank you for coming to this program, and the plan is for you to make an impact in the future, to take all these skills that you're getting, the learnings, the knowledge that many of us bring for each other, moving it forward down the road. So thank you for the work you're doing. Going to ask that you share this program. It's a program that I'm a fan of. As patients, for the most part, all of us volunteered our times, okay, to moving the work forward. Okay, we're not paid to do this. Even if some of us are in a position, even outside of work, we're advocating, we're spending so much time to move the work forward. And you're seeing right now that 4 of us are here supporting the program, the TRP program. So hopefully some of you can promote it and share it to others down the road to come join, to participate, and to even register in the future. So thank you, everyone. I'll pass it over to Yaz to close it off, I guess.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, like at every point. So thank you for that. I did want to just highlight again, I love the activity on the chat. As you saw, Andrew and Pat are networking with Serena. You guys using the chat is the exact same way. We're a large group of people, all different perspectives and stories. So it's great to see that. Ron, you did great monitoring the chat. It was going really quickly. And just everybody, and as part of the TRP, I do want to thank our panelists and moderator for joining us today. Honestly, it was great to get everyone's perspective and thoughts and war stories on this. So again, we do appreciate you joining us. I do want to cut this short, so because we've all been here. Andrew's been here for 5 hours before this session. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope everyone has a great—
Wait. Before you go, I also want to thank Yaz for all the work that she puts in organizing these and putting these together. And it's not easy, and she's an unsung hero.
Thank you, yes. And thank you, Andrew and Serena. You know I love you, Andrew. And Serena, so good to meet you, and I really love what you're doing, and I'm glad we're together now.
I
It's
agree.
great to meet both of you.
Serena,
All 3 of you. It's great to meet everybody.
Serena, I have my colleague Alexandra texting me during this saying, hook me up with Serena. She's incredible and remarkable. So we'll make sure that happens as well, because you did a really fantastic job. And Pat, I love you. You're the greatest. So thank you, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you. Thanks
Have
for including me.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.